Hello friends, welcome to E-Pathshala. I am Shagun Sharma, Assistant Professor in Political Science in Government College for Girls, Sector 42, Chandigarh. The paper is Foreign Policy of India and the module is India-France relationship. India and France have witnessed a different kind of relationship because it has been involved in various ups and downs. France has been deeply involved in India's colonialism too, because French had their colonies in Chandinagar as well as in Pondicherry, which became a point of contention after the Britishers left India. Moreover, India has also been highly inspired from the French ideals of a revolution, like liberty, equality, and fraternity. However, the relationship which France and India shared was not, it cannot be termed as very cordial in the initial phases. But later and gradually, due to further economic strengthening of the relations, the relationship between both the countries grew. Now, both are good partners and as well as strategic partners as far as defense deals are concerned. In this module, an effort has been made to evaluate India-France relations since its inception. Even historical perspective in their relations is given so much importance that a proper understanding about their ties can be made. At the outset, it has been explained that why in the beginning both followed a policy of neglect towards each other. Their compulsions and interests in this matter have been elaborately discussed. Later on, reasons for the transformations in their ties are explained so that changed context of their relations can be known. At the time of India's independence, France was having some part under its colonial rule, which it had captured since 1674. These territories include Pondicherry, Chandanagar, Mahe, Yaman, and Karaikal. These colonial possessions and divergent foreign policy orientations pursued by India and France prevent the emergence of warm relations between the two. Similarly, on the issue of transfer of colonial territories, both had different perceptions regarding each other. On the one hand, France viewed that any territorial exchange cannot be done without the consent of the people concerned. It was because via Article 2 of the French Constitution it has been made clear that no secession, no exchange and no addition of territory shall be valid without the consent of the populations concerned. But from Indian point of view, consent of people is very sacrosanct when any territorial transformations are made. It is only on this basis it claimed all colonial territories possessed by foreign powers even after its independence. But it must be admitted that France did not create much problem on this issue, rather it cooperated with India to resolve this issue with much sensibilities. Though in case of Chandanagar, the transfer was made through plebiscite, but in regard to other French territories, it was finalized by a treaty of transfer signed on 28 May 1956 and became operational after its ratification in 1962. However, the resolution of territorial issue did not bring the two countries closer to each other as they continue to differ in their foreign policy perspective. Bilateral relations. Period of neglect. Since independence, basic thrust of India's foreign policy has been to oppose colonialism, imperialism and racialism under the broader rubric of its foreign policy of non-alignment. Whereas France not only supported the case of colonial power, but it was itself following this policy regarding possessions of territories in the Third World. Besides, India adopted the policy of opposition to military alliance systems, whereas France openly supported the military blocs and joined NATO as part of its strategy to support Western military alliance system. Thus, basically, orientation of India's foreign policy had been towards Afro-Asian countries, whereas France was much leaning towards Europe in terms of its foreign policy goals. As a result of the above differences in outlooks, Both took contradictory stand on different issues of international politics. For instance, in case of prevailing movement for freedom struggle in Indochina region, India supported their struggle for independence, whereas France tried hard for the perpetuation of its own rule. Similarly, both took opposite stand on the vacation of colonial possessions in Morocco, Tunisia and Algeria by France. Even on the issue of nationalization of Suez Canal by Egypt in 1956, India vehemently opposed the Franco-British policies. It supported the Egypt's cause during this crisis. Thus, during the first decade, both followed an opposite outlook in their foreign policies, which led them away from each other. Moreover, both did not give much importance to each other in their foreign policy calculations. Period of new beginning. Coming of de Gaulle to power in 1958 in France to some extent marked the new beginning in India-France relations. This change had been there due to changed orientation of the new leader on various issues of war and peace. This changed attitude of France is reflected at two levels. One, at the level of its policies towards global levels, and second, its new inclination towards India. At the global level, President de Gaulle tried hard to bring Paris away from the integrated military structure of the NATO. He was instrumental in the removal of NATO's military bases in France. During his tenure, France also became critical of the USA's policy of aggression in Southeast Asia. Hence, this changed attitude of France attracted many third world countries in general and India in particular. In the context of India, new regime in France took certain initiatives which brought them closer to each other. Besides, bilateral compulsions of the two facilitated this process. At this juncture, India was isolated both from major powers and Afro-Asian states. After the war with China, India felt attracted towards a country with which it has not territorial problems. It has also been viewed that despite divergent ideological moorings between India and France, de Gaulle, on number of foreign policy initiatives, resembles to that of the policies of Jawaharlal Nehru. The signing of territorial transfer treaty between India and France in middle of 1962 facilitated the process of friendly ties between the two. As a result, a treaty enhancing economic and cultural cooperation between the two countries was signed. Through these improved economic ties, both tried for expansion of trade and other economic activities. Both established a joint commission to review the obstacles to facilitate free flow of trade between the two countries. These initiatives resulted into positive way and led to tremendous increase in the bilateral trade between them. The main items which India exported to France were hides and skins, precious and semi-precious stones, jute manufacture, cashew kernels, vegetable products and sandalwood oil. Whereas major imports from France have been machinery, fertilizers, iron and steel, transport equipments, pharmaceuticals and chemicals. However, it is also a fact that despite the increase in trade volume, it was not of much beneficial and significant for India. The latter continues to figure very marginally in terms of trade. Above emerging economic and cultural cooperation, however, do not rule out the prevalent differences over the foreign policy approaches of the two countries. De Gaulle's recognition of China just 14 days after the Sino-Indian War was a serious setback for emerging Indo-France relations. This not only facilitated support for China vis-à-vis India, but also followed suit by a number of states in Africa who were earlier under French rule. In Asia, France considered China as France of Asia, which automatically marginalized India in the strategy of former. Besides, as compared to France's commitment to NATO, SEATO and EEC, its response to war in India was very slow. Moreover, both the countries followed divergent approaches in their foreign policies. For instance, France's policies were based on the principle of power, whereas India's policy has been based on non-alignment. Even regarding the role in the United Nations, both countries differed with each other. Thus, due to international milieu and exigencies of global politics, de Gaulle could not adopt the similar outlook on foreign policy to that of Nehru. Hence, Indo-France relations could not become as warm as it looked apparently. Rather, only a new beginning was made for some short period. Emerging cooperation. These 2 decades up to the end of Cold War, India-France relations were directed towards enhancing cooperation between them. Serious efforts have been made by both of them to boost up their economic, political, and strategic ties. This multilateral cooperation can be well understood by analyzing 3 broad streams of their emerging relations: economic cooperation, strategic collaboration, and political understanding. Economic cooperation. Through numerous bilateral activities, both are increasing their economic cooperation during this period. France has been very liberal in giving loans and grants to India during this period. France signed MOUs and various other agreements to cooperate with India in a number of important sectors. To institutionalize the smooth working of their cooperation, both countries established an Indo-France study group in 1973. Main objective of this group is to provide suggestions and inputs for the policy makers to boost their bilateral economic cooperation. Both India and France came closer to each other not only due to bilateral cooperation but also because of letters changed perceptions towards the problem of Third World. As chairperson of non-aligned movement, when Mrs. Indira Gandhi visited France in 1983, she found France closer to the acceptance of some demands of the countries of the South. Beside bilateral and multilateral cooperation, both are building goodwill between them through the strengthening of cultural ties. Since the beginning of this period, France is encouraging education, cultural and scientific exchange programs between the people of 2 countries. To boost up these ties, both organized Festival of India in France and Festival of France in India. Through the holding of these festivals, bonds among the people of 2 countries were strengthened. Besides, during the visit of Rajiv Gandhi in 1985, France agreed on the project of cleansing Ganga, which is not only a technological cooperation but also represents spiritual dimension in India. During the celebration of Festival of India, water of Ganga was poured in river Seine. It represented and symbolized the merging of the 2 great cultures and the close links between the 2 countries. It was also agreed upon that an Indo-French study center will be opened in New Delhi to make people of India know more about the culture and people of France. Film media has been a very powerful channel of influencing the culture of each other in both the countries. To acknowledge this reality, during his visit in 1989, President François Mitterrand bestowed the highest French honor of Commander of the Legion to Satyajit Ray. Thus, both countries have tried hard to bring the people closer to each other. Strategic collaborations. Strategically speaking, India emerged as a regional power in South Asia after the end of India-Pakistan War of 1971. But in defense preparedness, it is still dependent on the supply of breadpins from erstwhile Soviet Unions. But now, India was planning for diversification of defense purchase. This was more seriously realized after the coming into power by Indira Gandhi in second term, that is in the decade of the 1980s. In that context, France is a major supplier of arms in the developed world. Given the emerging economic and cultural cooperation, it was inevitable for India and France to come closer to each other in defense sector. Thus, both the countries realized each other's compulsions and initiated process of collaboration in the area of defense, which was explicit through their numerous agreements during this period. In September 1976, France announced the offer to set up a plant in India to manufacture Mirage F-1 fighter aircraft. Initially, this plant was to assemble the aircraft, and progressively it started manufacturing sophisticated parts up to 100%. This plant was established not only to meet the requirements of Indian Air Force but also to manufacture some sophisticated parts for the French needs. Besides the supply of fighter aircrafts and missiles, France also resolved India's crucial problem of supply of enriched uranium for Tarapur. In 1982, at the intervention of President Mitterrand, France agreed to supply India enriched uranium for Tarapur nuclear power plant without insisting on a pursuit and perpetuity clause. France will supply uranium within the framework of the Indo-US Agreement of 1963 and Trilateral Agreement of 1971 between India, USA and IAEA. It will be in force as per the original agreement, that is up to 1993. Later on in 1990, France offered to sell two 1000 megawatt nuclear reactors to India. Political understanding. The above strengthening of economic and strategic ties are rooted in the deeper political understanding among the political leaders of the two countries. They have common perceptions on number of bilateral and global concerns. This commonality of views developed due to increased visits of leaders of both the countries to each other's nation. Through these visits, both elites could get the opportunities to understand each other's bilateral concern as well as problems faced by the developing countries. They could also be able to generate commonalities of view on some serious global issues. Sometimes these visits were marked by some emotional overtones as well, which created further closeness among two countries. Similarly, some political gestures do communicate the warmth and understanding among the two countries. This emerging political understanding resulted into sound bilateral cooperation between them in very sensitive and critical areas like defense, space, nuclear, aviation, etc. Besides, both leaders became well aware about the emerging differences and economic irregularities among the countries of North and South. They also realized the need for global cooperation on environmental and economic issues. However, despite cooperation in numerous areas, some problems still exist between them. Throughout these years, bilateral trade remained favorable towards India. Besides, foreign direct investments from France to India have been very low. India also failed to absorb all grants and loans extended by France towards it. Despite these minor problems, no serious irritants were there between the two. Strengthening of ties. Cooperation between them got consolidated during the post-Cold War era. This has been reflected in the form of threefold relationships: economic ties, defense cooperation, political understanding. Bilateral trade. In this post-Cold War scenario, India has viewed France as an important source of technology, FDI, and strengthening linkages with the European Union. France, on its part, have been active in developing cooperation in engineering and construction and other such areas unfolded in the wake of India's adoption of process of liberalization and economic reforms. As a result, during the first decade after post-Cold War, bilateral trade between them increased tremendously. By the year 2009, total bilateral trade went up by 99%, whereas India's exports increased up by almost 167%. Total bilateral trade between the two reached at 15 to 96 billion by the year 2014. India's import from France comprised mainly equipments and machinery, whereas its export consisted of a wide range of goods and services including both traditional and non-traditional items. Traditional items like garments, leather, textiles, raw cotton and yarn and marine exports constituted a major share. Non-traditional items such as automotive components, electronic and rubber components, chemicals and dyestuffs, pharmaceuticals, granite, consumer durable, etc. showed promising growth. An important element in their bilateral trade has been that balance of trade has been in India's favor since 1994 to 2005. But this position could not be maintained after that. In comparative terms, France is India's fifth largest partner in the EU after the UK, Germany, Belgium and Italy. Direct investments. France is the ninth largest investor in India. More than 360 Indo-French joint ventures have been approved till 2001. There is a tremendous scope for enhancing these collaborations. Key sectors of interest to France include power, hydrocarbons, telecommunications, auto parts, agro-industries, drugs and pharmaceuticals and environment. The institutional agreement for promoting investments exists in the form of bilateral investment protection agreement and an agreement on avoidance of double taxation. Science and technology collaborations. Indo-France bilateral cooperation in science and technology is regulated by overall umbrella agreements between the two governments. That is, Indo-French Center for the Promotion of Advanced Research, also known by its French acronym CEFIPRA. Besides, agreement between Indian ministry organizations and their French counterparts dealing with specific areas of science and technology and institution-to-institution agreements are also updated. Through this cooperation, India and France are collaborating in the field of biotechnology, applied physics, networking of scientific institutions, space, disaster management, space launching programs, etc. Defense cooperation. Indo-France defense cooperation exists since 1980s. When India started its diversification of defense purchase, Mirage aircrafts, missiles and number of other smaller defense equipments were purchased during that decade. In the present, France is gaining more importance due to problems of spares and supply of armaments from erstwhile Soviet Union after its disintegration. France is not only regular visitor to India's annual air shows but also helping it to develop its indigenous defense manufacturing base. Political partnership. The above economic and defense cooperation are being built on sound political understanding emerging between political elites of both the countries. On the one hand, this understanding between them is developing through the emerging India-France economic cooperation in the post-Cold War era. Large number of mutual bilateral visits of the dignitaries of the two countries has consolidated this process. These political understandings have been strengthened by the Indo-French Joint Commission for Cooperation in Culture, Education and Science. Institutional exchanges have been promoted between India's ICSSR, UGC, ICHR, ICPR, ICMR, etc. with their counterparts in France. Besides, the participation in film festivals have consolidated these bonds of understanding further. Even scholarships are offered by both the countries for mutual exchange of scholars between the two countries. Establishment of Indo-French Forum in 1998 has strengthened their ties further. Even the presence of 60,000 Indian community in France has created close contacts between India and France. Thus, political relationships strengthened by socio-cultural and humanitarian ties and further brought the two countries closer to each other. These closer ties, along with the emerging challenges of international terrorism and to develop a multipolar world order, have brought these two countries closer to each other. However, huge possibilities for development of cooperation in the sphere of economic, defense, space, science and technology are still open for them. During the last visit of Prime Minister Modi to France, both countries signed agreements to boost cooperation in multiple areas. Both signed 20 agreements covering cooperation in the areas of nuclear energy, defense, climate change, smart cities, terrorism, economic, transport, people-to-people contact, heritage, education, science and technology, health, sports, etc. Both also reaffirmed their commitments to the strategic partnership and agreed to further deepen their bilateral ties based on shared principles and values relating to democracy, freedom, rule of law, and human rights. Both also supported reforming the United Nations system, including democratization of Security Council. However, it can be concluded that France and India, due to colonial legacies and due to territorial adjustment problems, they could not share warm relationship. Moreover, France was also not very welcoming towards the idea of a new India. So, we could witness a very low phase in India and French relationship. But later, due to various economic, defense and cultural ties, both the countries came together. There were several cultural exchange programs in which India and French week programs and cultural events were organized in other states. Moreover, there were various defense deals also. As far as economic front is concerned, India and France also came closer.